Welcome back. You're listening to The Voice of Russia in London. I'm James Reinl, bringing you a debate on web-based activists and whistleblowers. The case of James Jeffrey is probably one of the hardest examples of internet hacking for the general public to sympathise with. The 27-year-old member of the hacking collective Anonymous stole masses of personal data about women from Britain's biggest abortion provider. While Jeffrey is unlikely to win praise by any other than a few hardline pro-lifers, other acts of internet piracy have been widely celebrated. Internet raids on the Vatican, government agencies and the global intelligence firm Stratfor are certainly cheered in some quarters. And that's before we get on to praise for websites such as WikiLeaks and sympathy for persecuted whistleblowers like Bradley Manning. So, is there a public good in busting open the websites of the mighty? Are the so-called hacktivists just geeky criminals or libertarians who are exposing the vices of evil corporations? And should whistleblowers such as Manning and America's cyber villain Julian Assange, the WikiLeaks founder, face justice? To probe these questions, we're hosting a debate in our London studios. I'm joined by Dai Davis from the intellectual property law firm Percy Crow Davis Co, Loz Kaye, leader of the Pirate Party UK, and Keith Cottenden from the digital detective firm Sci4. Okay, to get the ball rolling, I want to get a single-sentence answer from each of you on the following question. Hacktivists, are they common criminals or heroes of the internet age? And I'll turn first to the lawyer, Dai.
A bit of both. They're certainly not the whitest of the white, but neither are the blackest of black.
Okay, and Loz, do you stand in the middle there?
Hacktivists are people who have been radicalised by the current government policies.
Okay, and Keith?
Yes, the offences they commit are criminal, but they certainly provide interesting elements to the information security debate.
Okay. Dai, turning first to you, you said a bit of both. You said that within the realm of hacktivists there are good guys and bad guys. So who are the good ones and who are the bad ones?
Well, these are low-hanging fruit. People like Loz Kaye are relatively easy for the FBI and other law enforcement agencies, and indeed is led by the Americans. But like any law enforcement body, they always go after the people who are easiest to prosecute. And for every, if you like, one of these people that they're catching, and remember at the end of the day that most of what these people were doing in Loz Kaye was public, by which I mean they hacked into things, they made it public. What you have to worry about is the people who are hacking into things and not making it public. And that's where the real risk lies, and that's much harder to prosecute, much harder to investigate. As I say, the police always go after the low-hanging fruit, which in the case of Loz Kaye appears to have been the case.
Okay, now, Loz, your position was quite interesting. You blame the government. You blame government agencies for radicalising these groups.
Yes, absolutely. It's particularly what we can see from the motivation of groups like Loz Kaye and the amorphous collective that make up Anonymous. That their objectives are explicitly political. I think that's why they've gained so much publicity. They've associated themselves with, for example, the Occupy movement. They've come out against corporate greed. They've used the "We are the 99% slogan, and we've also seen with their targets, for example, with PayPal and MasterCard and Visa, that they've seen it's very much about defending the right to free speech, as they said, and the right to for transparency with WikiLeaks. And indeed, one of the key points that they've been focusing around is the idea of internet freedom. I think many people and many web activists feel at the moment as if the internet itself has been under siege with proposed legislation like SOPA in America, which caused a wave of protest with the Wikipedia blackout, and also anti-internet legislation like ACTA. Essentially, our governments have been pushing an anti-internet agenda and a surveillance agenda And it felt like there has been no real democratic outlet for protest. I think many feel that at the moment.
And Keith, when you started, you said that these hacktivists, you said, well, they are criminals, but they may also do good. Now, isn't that a kind of contradictory position?
Yes, there's a widespread confusion over the scale and nature of cyber criminality, which is undermining the efforts to tackle a menace that may be costing the economy billions of pounds a year. Businesses are at fault, with company bosses delegating responsibility to internal IT specialists in a deliberate effort to keep a problem that may not understand at arm's length. The issue of cyber risk needs to be made accessible for those who are neither familiar with technology nor highly IT literate.
Okay, and I started with the recent case that we had just before the weekend, which was this 27-year-old called James Jeffrey, and the data that he'd mined, the stuff that he'd got hold of, was personal information about a huge number of women who had sought help from an abortion clinic. Where does he fit into what you were just saying?
Well, I mean, he's committed a criminal offence, but he's highlighted a data protection issue that really needs to be highlighted so something can be done about it, so the people in that organisation can address a problem, a real data protection issue.
Okay, and going to you, Loz, on that issue of James Jeffrey, because you were talking about these guys as heroes, they've been radicalised by the government, but is there any justification for the kind of hacking that James Jeffrey was involved in?
No, absolutely not. I think one of the things that we've always tried to do in the Pirate Party is actually say it's important that there is another outlet and we do need a democratic way forward. We've always been very explicit to say that this is not a useful way forward. But also, and what we can see what's been happening over the last few months with the FBI using extensive resources. But I think many of us around the table agree that probably we're actually no safer, and actually we're no further forward towards real cyber security because of this. Again, it's, as Dai was saying, it's about the low-hanging fruit, and also it's we're saying, is this really what the FBI should be for? Is actually picking up teenagers in their bedrooms? I think that our taxpayers here in the United Kingdom have some real questions to ask. We've been told by the government that £650 million has been set aside by the government to deal with cybersecurity. What are we actually getting for that money?
Okay, Dai, I'm going to throw that one over to you. Should we be spending so much taxpayers' money picking up teenagers in their bedrooms?
No, or at least not these sorts of teenagers. The sorts of teenagers we should trying to get and approach or track down are the ones who are actually really using this information to defraud people. I mean, there are hundreds of millions of pounds a year being made by people who are defrauding other people on the internet. And what we've seen in terms of the recent prosecutions are very much people who are not involved in that, or who are only on the periphery, by which I mean people like Loz Kaye publicising the information they got, not deliberately concealing it. It's people who are concealing it and then using it and abusing that information. I mean, there are lots of mixed political messages here. Political message number one is, well, we're only going to prosecute people who are easy to prosecute. We're not interested in prosecuting people who are defrauding other people using their credit card on the internet. I mean, you can't even go into a police station in this country now and report your credit card misuse on the internet. It's no longer a reportable offence. What sort of mixed message is that to people? We should be spending money properly targeting the real criminal gangs who are making money out of this, not the Loz Kaye of this world.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the things why it's really unfortunate. We at the Pirate Party have been actually trying to get the government and the Cabinet Office to be more specific about how they're using their money. We've got just a few list of companies, people like Tesco and Barclays, we know, that are being involved in this process, but actually precious little information. And I think obviously there are security considerations, but we need to be focusing particularly on the financial damages, not trying to create a climate of fear against protest.
Loz and Dai, I'm gathering from what you're saying that you've been closely following the case of Hector Javier Monseilleur, the 28-year-old unemployed programmer who was known mainly as Sabo, who spent months as an FBI informant. Have you been following that case? And maybe Dai, you could tell us a little bit of the background of the case, and then we can get on to whether or not that was a correct use of the criminal justice system.
Well, of course, in the United States, there's a fundamental difference in the United States and the United Kingdom, which is in the United States, you're very much allowed to entrap people in a way which is not permitted in the United Kingdom. And they'd used the so-called leader of LOLSEC, in fact, who was picked up last August, to entrap the other half dozen members. Quite interesting that in that 6-month period, or more indeed, that they allowed LOLSEC to continue to operate, huge amounts of data was reportedly stolen, including from, I think it was Stratfor, a security consultancy. And there's lots of questions being asked as to whether they should have, if you like, had such a large, wide-scale entrapment process, which certainly wouldn't be permissible in the United Kingdom.
And Keith, is this something that you support, the roundup of the LOLSEC hackers?
I mean, these guys, are very clever individuals from an IT perspective, and their talents could be better utilised if we nurtured them and educated them, because a lot of the time they're not looking for financial gain. They're not the criminals, that are running the organised gangs. These are just clever lads who don't get beyond their bedroom. And cybercrime can damage every organisation, and we've all got a role to play in creating a global security culture. We can't rely on the government guidelines. We've got to help ourselves. And these guys could be used to help with the security measures that the organisations are just blinkered to, that they think they're protected. And as you've said with the example, an intelligence agency that's been hacked. I mean, raising your head above the parapet in this game is dangerous, because you're just asking to be shot down.
You're listening to The Voice of Russia in London. I'm James Reinl, bringing you a debate on web-based activists and whistleblowers. I'm joined by Dai Davis from the intellectual property law firm Percy Crow Davis Co, Loz Kaye from the Pirate Party UK, and Keith Cottenden from the digital detective firm Cypher. Now, seeing as we've got onto the subject of Stratfor, the intelligence firm that was hacked just before Christmas last year, I wanted to play you gentlemen a clip. This is an audio soundbite from Julian Assange, the founder of WikiLeaks, and this is how he describes the hacking of Stratfor, the information that was obtained, and then thereafter how it was released through his whistleblowing website.
We have been investigating the activities of this company for some months, and what we have discovered is a company that is a private intelligence enron. On the surface it presents as if it's a media organisation providing a private subscription intelligence newsletter, but underneath it is running paid informants networks, laundering those payments through the Bahamas and through Switzerland, through private credit cards. It is monitoring Bhopal activists for Dow Chemical. It is monitoring PETA activists for Coca-Cola. So it is engaged in a seedy business.
Strong words there from Julian Assange, the founder of WikiLeaks. He describes Stratfor as a seedy business. He talks about them monitoring activists and money laundering even. If you buy into what he's saying, Dai, isn't Stratfor the kind of organisation that we want to have hacktivists looking into?
Well, this raises a much more detailed question, but in a way it supports what I've said. The problem with the law is that it's very, very easy to break the law. I mean, Assange is making allegations of money laundering, he's making allegations of unlawful data interception against Stratfor. These allegations, whether they're true or not, the point is that it's very, very easy to break the law. So why are the police going against people who are easy to track down, whereas the real villains, the real people we would have no debate about whether they're black or white, are the people who are not coming before the courts because they're too difficult to track down and the police don't go after them.
Sorry, who are these people?
Well, the sorts of people who are making millions out of scams tracking down your credit card on the internet, the sorts of people who don't publicise, like Luxec did, what the data that they obtained from a million people's alleged credit cards from Sony, but they keep it to themselves and they use it to make millions.
Okay, and what do you think about Assange's comments?
I think we have seen that this has been slightly overstating the case of the importance of this particular leak, but I think it falls very much into what's clear that it's within WikiLeaks' mission to actually to be exposing corruption and exposing, just essentially holding up a mirror to the society that we've become, and so completely once again. You can see the motivation is actually getting at the truth. So there is a real distinction to be made in terms of what WikiLeaks' project is about than, say, Anonymous. That it's very much about whistleblowing, and whistleblowing is something that is an important part of the democratic process. And I mean, I've always said, that the real thing is about if you don't want your dirty secrets exposed, they don't have dirty secrets in the first place. I mean, I think absolutely he's picking up on the Bhopal activists, but you can see that the whole point about WikiLeaks was actually bringing actual information to light. It's very unfortunate that I think the fixation on the personality of Assange has actually rather eclipsed the real content. Thinking back to the Iraq war logs, for example, that actually 15,000 civilian deaths in Iraq were revealed that we previously didn't know about, and these are real key issues and about how we are using our money as a society, what we've become involved in, and this is obviously in the public interest, is actually to get to the heart of the truth, and this is yet another move in that direction. This certainly is the motivation for WikiLeaks.
And Keith, what Loz is saying there is that it's in the public interest, but you're one of the organisations that tries to clamp down on this kind of release of information. So surely you disagree with him?
I don't disagree completely with him. We've got to have a system in place where corruption can be exposed. So it's not data protection at all costs, but data needs to be properly protected and properly regulated as well.
And how easy is it to hack into a firm like Stratfor? You'd think they'd have pretty high internet security, but these guys make it look like a piece of cake.
Yeah, I mean, you've got to sit there and be amazed when an organisation that professes to be at that skill level, are hacked. But sometimes you miss what's right in front of your nose. Yeah, and I'm never amazed, to be honest, when I hear all the different organisations that get hacked. I watched some of them happen in front of my eyes last summer, the likes of Amazon, who had a tremendous recovery from when they were hacked by Anonymous. And it was great to see a system working. They were down for such a short period of time, and that sort of showed that they had a reasonable system in place. They identified it and they dealt with it straight away.
Well, I mean, I think that's one important thing to actually to pick up on. I think there's been sometimes both the FBI and indeed Anonymous are actually in danger of believing their own hype. I mean, things like denial of service, so-called attacks, aren't in fact that sophisticated. Really, it's the kind of basically the equivalent of lots of people ringing up the same phone number at the same time, and it's and I think it was one of those things that actually it's overstated.
In a nutshell, anybody can be hacked. You cannot protect yourself. If you want to take an organisation down, you will take them down. The idea is it is detected, it's detected quickly, and it's dealt with. And any organisation that believes that they can't be hacked is living in a fantasy land. Enough of these people trying to go at the same time, which is what Anonymous and Loz were, just a group of very clever individuals who had the technology to be able to cause disruption.
And Dai, you wanted to get something in there?
I was just going to say that, at the end of the day, it does seem that most of the attacks that have been reported recently by Loz have been very low-level attacks. They're not as sophisticated as they otherwise could be. If it does actually spur these companies into increasing their security, then it'll have done some good.
You're listening to the Voice of Russia in London. I'm James Reinl, bringing you a debate on web-based activists and whistleblowers. I'm joined by Dai Davis from the intellectual property law firm Percy Crow Davis Co, Loz Kaye from the Pirate Party UK, and Keith Cottenden from the digital detective firm Cypher. Okay, I want to get back onto WikiLeaks now, because I think we've covered the idea of the need for internet security and the hacking side of it, but some of this information is then passed on to the whistleblowing website WikiLeaks, which raises a whole different set of moral questions. Now, I want to take you back to 2010, and this is Julian Assange being interviewed, and I'm going to play another soundbite from him where he talks about the moral purpose behind his organization.
So let's talk a little more broadly about this. I mean, in general, what's your philosophy? Why is it right to encourage leaking of secret information?
Yeah, well, there's a question as to what sort of information is important in the world, what sort of information can achieve reform. And there's a lot of information. So information that organizations are spending economic effort into concealing, that's a really good signal that when the information gets out, there's a hope of it doing some good. Because the organizations that know it best, that know it from the inside out, are spending work to conceal it. And that's what we've found in practice, and that's what the history of journalism is.
So, Loz, Assange there is saying that if it's worth hiding, then it must be pretty good.
Well, I think that's actually a very useful reminder of what WikiLeaks is in its intention. It actually is as a journalistic exercise, but also an exercise in searching out truth. And there is a real distinction between the type of information that they're seeking and I think that what we've been talking about earlier in the programme. The information, they've talked about information that's of historical and political significance. And it's about essentially information that should belong to us all. When you can see that in the Iraq war logs, you can see that in the Afghan war logs, and you can actually see that in the Cablegate releases as well. That was the intention. That I think one of the things that's become very frustrating is that even WikiLeaks has essentially fallen into the trap of being about itself recently. But it's actually going back to what was the information. So just one example of many is that the Labour Party, previous Labour government here in the United Kingdom had told us that cluster bombs were no longer going to be stored on British soil. Actually, what was revealed that was not the case. So we've been essentially, I mean, in my view, Parliament has been misled, and that actually the government was carrying out a foreign policy that was entirely different to the one that was stated to the public. That is absolutely in the public interest to reveal that. And really, this is what governments need to understand, just as we've been already talking about, that there is no safe system, where if you're talking about your commercial interests, but also that goes for governments as well. But particularly that we need a sea change in governments' attitudes, that we need to be for a properly democratic system, we need an informed electorate, and an electorate that actually is truly part of the decision-making process, not just told what it's supposed to hear, and what we're told just for our own good. And this is what the WikiLeaks project has been about. And this is whistleblowing. It's much bigger than any one person. It's much bigger than Assange. It's actually it's a much larger movement than that.
Well, Loz is pretty clear about what he thinks about that one. But Dai, when you gave us a paradigm earlier about there being good guys involved in this and bad guys too, where does somebody like Julian Assange sit? Or even Bradley Manning, the guy who's been locked up by the Americans in jail for more than a year now, who released the information to WikiLeaks?
Well, just dealing with the Assange quote that you played, I must say I don't agree with his basic premise. I mean, I can't argue Loz's example, but Assange said that that companies that are putting economic benefit into concealing the data, there was a benefit of making that data public, and there was always a benefit of making that data public. I don't agree with that connection. I can accept that sometimes there is a benefit of making that information public, but at other times there is no benefit and no justification for making that benefit public. Why should the names of informers in Iraq and Afghanistan be made public. I don't understand the public benefit there. Most journalists, most of the time, most editors, most of the time, make judgments about what's in the public benefit, and most of the time they get it right. The problem with WikiLeaks, as has been demonstrated in the past, is it's a gross here's all the data without any editorial control.
Okay, that was Dai Davis from the intellectual property law firm Percy Crow Davis Co, wrapping up our debate on WikiLeaks, web-based activists and whistleblowers. I was also joined by Loz Kaye, leader of the Pirate Party UK, and Keith Cottenden from the digital detective firm Cypher. You're listening to the Voice of Russia in London. I'm James Reinl. Stay tuned. We'll be back shortly.